what better on a cold New England day than to make traditional New England clam chowder. And to do that, we're going to need a few ingredients. I got a 10-ounce can of baby clams, an 8-ounce bottle of clam juice, and I like to pick the kind that you can kind of see some pulp in there. I also use an 8-ounce can of a 6-ounce can of chopped clams, some sea salt, some white pepper, an onion, a little bit of celery, and I like to get a few leaves in there too as well. Some good flavor in the leaves. Some bacon, half and half, and a few russet potatoes. I like to use a good solid kind. You wouldn't want to use a bliss potato because they don't hold up as well in the heat. So to keep the potatoes from turning to mush, I recommend a firmer, like a russet type of potato. I'm going to start by dicing up a couple pieces of bacon. Half-inch chunks is fine. Also want to get your pan preheated before we throw the bacon in it. Just put those aside. And some onions. I like to go down into the middle of the onion and get the heart. Tends to be a little bit sweeter. Tastes better. And you just want to cut your onions, again about a half-inch size diced. That's fine. Maybe about a half to 3/4 of a cup. So once the bacon is halfway to brown here, we're going to put our onions in on top of it. And we want to cook this all until the onions take on a nice golden brown glaze. Now while the bacon and onions are cooking down, I'm going to chop a little bit of celery with the leaves. I like to chop it kind of small. And we'll throw it in with the onions and the bacon. 1 large clove of garlic. And I'm just going to chop it kind of roughly because I want a subtle flavor of the garlic in the chowder. Once the vegetables are cooked al dente and the onions kind of take on a golden brown around the edges, you can add the clams. We add the juice. And once you have all the clams in the pot, you bring it back up to temperature and set it on for a slow simmer. And 4 medium potatoes. They're a little smaller than I would normally choose, but it's all I had on hand. And we're going to cut the potatoes. You don't want to get them too small. I like to leave them in, I'd say maybe 1.5 inches around. If they get too small, they turn to mush. And when the chowder's been simmering for a few minutes, you can add the potatoes. The chowder's been simmering now for several minutes, and I'm going to check the potatoes. They're still a little bit firm. When this tip sinks into the potato, but seems to want to stop a short ways in, then that's about when it's time to add the half and half. And when the potatoes are finally done, I'm going to add about a quart of half and half. And keep your eye on the consistency of the vegetables and clams and potatoes to how much milk you got in there, because if it looks like the soup's getting thin, you might want to stop adding to it. And this is a chowder and not a stew, so you don't want to add too little as well. And that was probably just under a quart. And the secret ingredient in any good New England clam chowder, white pepper. And you want to use this very easy in stages. So I'm just going to put a thin dust in. Oh, there might be a quarter of a teaspoon on there right now. I'm going to stir it in and let it heat up for about 5 minutes, and then see what effect that had on the chowder. And for the final phase of our clam chowder project, we need to make a roux and thicken it. So what I've done is melted some butter in the microwave. I got about a half a stick in there. And I'm adding 1 heaping teaspoon, 2 big heaping teaspoons, 3 big heaping teaspoons of flour. And I'm just going to kind of work it into the butter. This is much too thin here. It's almost like a frosting consistency maybe. So 1 teaspoon at a time. I'm going to bring it up until it looks like that paste you ate in kindergarten. I'm going to add the roux with a whip and just dip the whip right into the roux and whip it. And the chowder has to be bubbling for this to work. Not a rapid bubble, just a nice slow simmer. But as long as the bubbles pop in the surface, this is going to thicken quickly for you. Kind of work it in a little bit at a time and check the consistency as you go. And don't forget, this will thicken as it sits, and as the potatoes sit in the mixture longer and longer, the starch bleeds into the broth and it will thicken as it sits. I'm going to put the cover on and let it sit with the fire off for about 5 minutes to let the thickening process settle out. That's good. A little bit malnourished though. At this point, you dust a little sea salt on top. And sometimes you don't have to, depending on how those clams, the canned clams were. I don't know, maybe a teaspoon of salt going in there. And a little bit of white pepper. And again, if you like a little bit of zing in your food, a little bit more white pepper never hurts. Perfecto.